right, Alexander, let's talk about the situation with allegedly Russian drones flying over Poland and being shot down by Poland and NATO. Poland invoking Article 4, which is the article before Article 5, obviously. Maybe if you're doing Annalena Baerbock math, that wouldn't be the case. But Article 4, they're talking about Article 4, which is the NATO members consulting before moving on to Article 5. And you have reports and analysis which is showing that perhaps these were not Russian attack drones. It looks like these were Russian decoy or reconnaissance drones. So that's the first point to make. There are reports which claim, I can't verify this, which claim that this might be some sort of Ukraine false flag. And there are also reports which claim that perhaps these decoy or reconnaissance drones were somehow pushed off target, veered off target because of electric jamming or electric warfare. You also have various reports which claim that the Belarusian military actually notified the neighboring countries in NATO in the West that they were trying to shoot down these drones that had veered off course, and they notified them to be aware of such drones over their territory. So it does appear as if there is a lot of information and evidence which points to the fact that this was not some sort of a Russian attack on Poland. And then, of course, you have the most logical evidence that there is, the most logical argument that there is about these drones and how it's not an attack on Poland, which is the fact that Russia would not attack Poland in this kind of way. For 3-4 years, Russia has been very careful to not escalate the conflict and to keep it confined within the boundaries of Ukraine and the Donbass. They've been very, very careful, even though the collective West and the United States, and especially the Biden White House, has not done so.
Yeah,
they've been very deliberate to attack the Russian Federation, especially with ATACMS long-range missiles. I'm talking pre-2014 Russia. So anyway, and of course, Poland has been as active as any other country in the collective West in having a part to play in the conflict and in the escalation of the conflict with Russia. I mean, Poland is where the weapons are moved from NATO into Ukraine. It trains soldiers, it trains pilots. There are Polish mercenaries. So over 4 years, 4 or 5 or 6 decoy reconnaissance drones. That's the situation. And of course, just one final point to make before you talk about this situation. Let's not forget that in 2022, I believe it was, or 2023, we had a similar incident where Ukraine said it was a Russian missile, and it turned out to be a Ukraine S-300, I believe, missile that had landed in Poland. But you had the same outcry from Ukraine officials and from various neocons and collective West warmongers calling for Article 5. Your thoughts on, I have kind of said a lot, but there's a lot to this. Your thoughts on what's going on.
There's an awful lot to unscramble. Well, let's first of all begin with this idea that this was a deliberate attack by the Russians to send some kind of signal or warning, which is what you're getting all over the media today. The polls, as you rightly say, invoking Article 4 of the Washington Treaty, seeking a meeting of the UN Security Council. This is going to be the big attack from Russia against Poland. It proves that Russia is indeed planning some kind of massive invasion of Europe after it captures Ukraine. I mean, this is the narrative you're reading all over the media today. It is an absurd one. And I think we need to say that absolutely clearly. As you rightly say, for 3.5 years, the 3.5 years of the conflict, of the special military operation, the Russians have shown extraordinary restraint in not seeking to expand the war beyond the territory of Ukraine. A restraint which the Western powers have not shown. They have armed Ukraine with long-range missiles, and they have assisted Ukraine to conduct missile strikes on Russian territory. Now, if the Russians were going to change their stance, if they were going to give some kind of warning to the West or take some big aggressive move against the West at this time, and it's not clear why they would, by the way, because let's face it, they're winning the war and other developments are taking place over the last week, which suggests that things are moving further and further in their favor. We'll come to that later. Would the Russians, if they were going to make that kind of warning, give that sort of signal, have sent inert reconnaissance drones without explosives, decoy drones, drones that apparently cost between $8,000 and $10,000 to make? Would they make this warning by sending across the border those kind of drones? It's like saying that instead of a rocket, you send a balloon. I mean, it's just absurd. I mean, the story is actually inherently absurd. Now, these were Russian drones. I mean, there's no doubt at all. They were Russian-produced drones. I've seen the pictures. I recognize them immediately. You know, I don't always recognize things very easily, and I don't see pictures very easily, but this was a drone that I actually recognized. It's called the Gerbera drone. It is a decoy drone. It's very simple to build. It's very basic. It's got a shape that sort of resembles a Duran. And when the Russians conduct big drone and missile strikes, they have these decoy drones along with the other drones, the real attack drones, the Duran drones. They mix them up so as to confuse the Ukrainian air defenses. And quite often the Ukrainians do shoot them down, or if they don't shoot them down, they fall to the ground because they are not striking any particular target. They don't carry warheads or anything of that kind. So these are inert decoy drones. They are Russian, but it is inconceivable that the Russians would have used these kind of drones to deliver some kind of warning against the West. So there are various possibilities. Now, the Russian Defense Ministry issued a statement yesterday, a very interesting statement, and it was also supported by a statement issued by the Russian Foreign Ministry. And the Russian Defense Ministry said this: we carried out this enormous missile and drone strike across Western Ukraine. Our targets, all our targets, were within Ukraine itself. We have seen these reports about these drones. We are not saying these are not our drones, but we are mystified by this. We don't understand exactly what has happened. Let's meet with the military people from Poland and have a discussion about this and figure out what happened. And that, it seems to me, is the obvious thing to do. I mean, the obvious thing to do is for the Polish military and the Russian military to come together and hold the discussion and find out exactly what happened. Now, the Russian Defense Ministry says they don't understand this because, as far as they know, these drones don't have the range to reach targets in Poland. And this is what some people have seized on. And they say, well, lots and lots of these drones have fallen intact across Ukraine because there's been massive drone strikes, and these decoy drones, as I said, are mixed in the drone strikes. And after the attack happens, if they're not shot down, they simply fall to earth. They don't explode because they don't carry any explosives. They fall to earth intact. And some people are saying that the Ukrainians could collect them, cobble them up, put a new engine on them, launch them themselves into Poland, and that this is some kind of false flag to create an incident of that kind. Now, I don't say that isn't possible. I mean, and I don't say that Zelensky and Budanov and all of these people are incapable of doing something like that. Perhaps they did. All I'm saying is we've no evidence of this, not at the moment. I mean, it's possible, but we don't know for a fact that that was what happened. And, there might be other possibilities. It may be that the Russians underestimate the effectiveness of the engines of these things, or maybe they were carried along further by the wind or something like that. I'm not an aerospace engineer. I don't know. The way to work out the truth is for the Poles to do what the Russians are offering, to meet with the Russians and to have a discussion and to conduct a joint investigation and to come to the conclusions, to find out what actually took place. Of course, that is not going to happen because doing that would go completely against the narrative that we are seeing being promoted across the media and in Poland, that this is a deliberate, intentional attack with, as I said, drones that are basically plastic balloons with the propeller added to it by the Russians against Poland. I mean, I'm exaggerating a little, but that's basically what it is. So we don't want to spoil that narrative by letting the facts get in the way. So the last thing we want to do is to actually sit down with the Russians and find out what actually happened and establish the true facts. Because obviously, as I said, never let the facts, the mere facts, get in the way of a good story.
No, because it's an agenda that they want to happen here. The West and Zelensky and Ukraine, and that agenda, that goal is to get the United States to provide air support and air defense and effectively a no-fly zone. At the very least, at the very minimum, they would like the United States to do that in the west of Ukraine, all the way up to the center of Ukraine. That's pretty much what they would like to have happen. And so they're going to use this to approach the United States. They have supporters in the United States who are also calling for some sort of Article 5 or something, right? So they're putting pressure. The neocons, like the Lindsey Grahams, they're going to put pressure on Trump on their side. The Europeans are going to put pressure on Trump from their side. Of course, Zelensky's not going to shut up about this.
No,
and that's the goal here. The goal. I don't think it's so much about a NATO war with Russia, even though Zelensky would absolutely welcome that. I mean, Duda did an interview. The former president of Poland did an interview about a week ago, and he admitted that Zelensky was trying to pull Poland into a conflict with Russia, an open conflict with Russia, in order to get NATO into an open conflict with Russia. So you have the former president of Poland admitting that Zelensky has been trying to do this, which makes Zelensky into it paints a picture of a very dangerous, unhinged, crazy Zelensky who will do anything to remain in power. But I think the end goal of the Europeans and the neocons is to put enough pressure on Trump so that he says, okay, all right, we'll provide a no-fly zone in Ukraine.
Absolutely. Now, can I just make a few quick points here? The first is that obviously the Poles have taken it to the UN Security Council. I think that was a mistake, by the way, because obviously the Western powers have a structural majority there, but the Russians will be there to make their own points in response. And it is not impossible that some of the non-aligned global South countries will say, well, look, the Russians are offering a discussion about this. Before coming and making accusations, shouldn't you not speak to them first? I think, it's possible that could happen. But then I suppose in the West, they don't really care because who's going to know about this? But anyway, I don't think they gained much by going to the UN Security Council. The second thing that I'm going to say is this. Now, taking it from the points that you've just said about what Duda said about how Zelensky has been trying to get the West involved in the war. And the fact that Zelensky did try previously to use an incident where an Ukrainian air defense missile, and by the way, it was a Ukrainian air defense missile, I was astonished to find, without any previous admission that they claimed the opposite, the British media yesterday, when they discussed this incident, quietly confirmed that it was a Ukrainian air defense missile. Previously, a Ukrainian air defense missile fell into Poland. Zelensky tried to make a huge issue of it in order to get the West directly involved in the conflict in Ukraine. And he's been agitating to do that ever since. And this is clearly what's happened. Now, the last 2 weeks have been very disappointing for him. He went to the meeting in Paris, which was co-hosted by Macron and Starmer, the coalition of the willing meeting. Apparently, it was all talk and nothing more. He said this is all theory. I'm not seeing anything practical. There was a telephone call that same evening between the European leaders and Zelensky and Trump. Trump apparently was in a terrible mood, very bad mood, very angry and very combative, and refused to get pinned down on the question of security guarantees for Ukraine or backstops for the Europeans or anything like that. Now, this was all supposed to have been sorted out in meetings that took place earlier this week. But those meetings have come and gone, and there's been no further word from the United States about security guarantees and backstops or anything of that kind. Then there was talk about more sanctions and pressure on the Russians to bring them to the table, in other words, to get them to capitulate and to accept Zelensky's terms. And that hasn't happened either. Trump and his people have told the Europeans, look, I will impose massive sanctions, not just on Russia, but on Russia's trading partners, on China and India, if you do the same. And the Europeans, according to the Wall Street Journal, have said no. And they've had to say no, because doing that would have been the last blow to their economies. And I think that even people like Friedrich Merz know that that is too far to go. So that's now given Trump his reason for not going ahead with the Lindsey Graham, Richard Blumenthal sanctions. He can say, well, if the Europeans are not going to do it, why should we? Why should the United States do it? Why should we be the only people to impose massive 100% tariffs on China and India and other countries that trade with Russia if our European allies are not doing it? So Zelensky probably figures that out. So he knows all about the deterioration of the situation on the battlefronts, which is getting worse all the time, by the way, and he's getting desperate. So what does he do? Well, you can imagine, and I'm not saying this happened because I don't know, but you can imagine that he and Budanov and Malyuk, the SBU person, whoever, all of those people, they all got together and said, well, let's try when the Russians conduct the next big drone and missile strike on Western Ukraine. Let's put together these Gabala drones that we found littered all over the landscape of Ukraine. Let's send them to Poland and say to the Russians and tell the Europeans and the Americans, look, you see, we need you to come in to sort this out, bring in your air forces, bring in your air defense forces. The Russians are aggressive and fight us in that way. If you want to go down the route that I've discussed, and I want to stress it's all speculation, it's all theory. I don't know this for a fact, but if you want to go down this route, let me repeat again. Zelensky has the motives and he has the means, and he is the sort of person who might do this. And the Ukrainians have the organizing abilities to do this. The kind of people who were able to conduct drone attacks against Russian air bases can certainly refurbish some Russian decoy drones and send them across Poland.
Well, I'll take it one step further, Alexander. According to German investigators, Ukraine, they have the resources to blow up a pipeline in Nord Stream. That's what they tell us.
Exactly.
It was Ukraine.
Exactly.
So if they can do that, sending a couple of decoy drones into Poland is nothing for them, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And Zelensky is is not shutting up about this. I mean, I think he's posted like 1,000 Instagram, TikTok videos about this. Please don't fall for the Russian disinformation. This was a Russian attack on NATO. He's not shutting up about this, which to me shows that he's in a panic. He is desperate to get people to believe this, and most importantly, he's desperate to get Trump to believe in this story. Trump posted on Truth Social. One second. He posted on Truth Social. I want your thoughts on this. What's with Russia violating Poland's airspace with drones? Here we go.
Yeah.
Interesting post. And also just one more thing to say so you can wrap up the video. He called Nawrocki, not Tusk. I think that's revealing. Your thoughts?
Absolutely. No, I agree. I mean, I'm going to interpret this comment in the only way that I think that it can be interpreted, which is that Trump is seeing right through everything that is taking place. I mean, basically he's saying, oh, look, here we go again. They're coming back. They're asking me to come and pull the coals out of their fire for them. I'm not going to be taken in by this. I've seen this all before. I'm not falling for this. I'm not falling for this. And that's, I think, the message that True Social post conveys. Beyond that, there is also the further fact that he called Nawrocki, and there's no doubt about this. If you listen to Nawrocki, if you listen to what he said during his election, but more importantly, if you listen to what he's been saying since his inauguration, he clearly believes that Poland must look after itself, and this isn't any longer. They don't want any longer to be involved. He doesn't think Poland should be involved any longer in Ukraine, and I think that marks a genuine sea change within Poland. I mean, I think public opinion in Poland has for a long time been moving steadily in that direction. And Tusk himself, who Trump does not get on with, just to say, I think that Tusk, I've been reading this. The British media has been writing about this for a long time. He is losing support in Poland. He is becoming looks increasingly like he's on his way out. And Trump not only is calling Nawrocki, who, by the way, notice that when he first started, he didn't blame the Russians. Nawrocki was very careful not to say that it was the Russians. This is in his first comments. Tusk had no such hesitation, but Nawrocki was slower. Nawrocki is somebody who I think Trump feels he can work with and who thinks in much the same way that Trump himself does about things, and who's probably going to be there for a long time, and who will probably be the person in full power in Poland before very long, because Tusk is on his way out. So I think Trump basically signals, I'm not falling for this. I'm going to talk to the person in Poland who I can work with. I'm not going to waste my time with Tusk.
Yeah. Tusk on his way out, becoming very unpopular. So all the more reason for Tusk to take the Macron-Merz-Stama route when it comes to unpopularity at home, right?
Absolutely.
Blame it all on Russia. That's the formula.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, on that question, by the way, I've seen an opinion poll. There are lots of opinion polls, and maybe this was an isolated one, but there was an opinion poll that I saw coming from Poland, which suggested that most polls, it was very even, but more polls blame Ukraine for this than Russia. Now, as I said, there might be other opinion polls that say something different. I'm not sure, but anyway, that's
I saw that poll, but like 4%. It was like a 4% difference. Like 38% believed thought that this wasn't Russia, and 34% thought it was Russia, or 38% thought this was Ukraine. Actually, I think it was the
that's
exact.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
But I mean, the point I'm making, one way or the other, is that if assuming that opinion poll is reliable, which I suspect it is, by the way, it further points to, as I said, the drift in Polish opinion. People in Poland are becoming increasingly fed up with Ukraine. They don't like Zelensky. They don't like some of the people in Ukraine who are close to Zelensky for very, very well-known historical reasons that go back to the events of the Second World War and beyond. And I think Poland generally is cooling on Zelensky and Ukraine. And I think Tusk is, as I said, out on a limb on this.
Yeah, and you don't even need to, just to wrap up the video, to get into all the details and the facts about what happened. Just cui bono, who, right?
Well,
Who
exactly.
benefits
Well,
from,
exactly.
from this? It's
Well, exactly.
yeah. Anyway, all right, we'll end the video there. TheDuran.locals.com. We are on Rumble and Telegram and X, and go to the Duran shop, pick up some merch like what we are wearing in this video update. Link is in the description box down below.